Hello, this is Todd Horne on the road to Oxford. I'm the editor of TigerRag.com, and we're here with the 18th episode of Tiger Rag's Audibles podcast. We're coming to you, like I said earlier, from the road to Oxford. I'm actually hoping I can stop in at William Faulkner's house and take a tour of that before I head on down to the stadium or close to the stadium. You guys probably know this is a huge game for the LSU Tigers and the Ole Miss Rebels this weekend in Oxford. LSU going into the game with a 3-1 record overall, 2-0 in the Southeastern Conference. Ole Miss, of course, is 3-1 and 0-1, coming off of a 24-10 very disappointing loss last week to Alabama. It was disappointing for Ole Miss and for, of course, Lane Kiffin, who actually, I think from talking to various Ole Miss people, they really thought that this was going to be the year that they took down Nick Saban in Alabama. That didn't happen. And so that leaves this week as being basically a desperation game for the Ole Miss Rebels if they hope to lay claim to the SEC West. Of course, LSU, the defending SEC West champions, coming off of a nail-biting 34-31 win over Arkansas last week in a very exciting game in Tiger Stadium. The problem is it shouldn't have been exciting. LSU was a 17.5-point favorite, a much better team than Arkansas. And what's scary is Ole Miss is actually, on paper, a better team than Arkansas. And so LSU's having to go into Ole Miss and play what should be a better team than they played last week. And they're having to do it, of course, in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium before a bunch of desperate and probably very loud Ole Miss fans. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to give you the keys to the game, what my keys to the game are, and they're very simple. And we're going to talk to Wilson Alexander, who is the LSU football lead beat reporter for LSU football from theadvocate.com. We're going to kind of go over a little bit about what happened at Arkansas and what the state of the program is headed into this weekend's big-time tilt with the Ole Miss Rebels. So we'll be back right after this. Jake, I'm not going to be able to stop at Pawpaw's on the way out.
Oh, man.
Yeah, sorry about that. Just time doesn't allow me to do so, but I'm going to get up there soon. But I want to thank Pawpaw's RVs for sponsoring this, as they always do. And if you could do me the favor and give the specifics on Pawpaw's, and we'll come back and I'll give you the keys, and then we'll move into Wilson.
All right, that sounds good. Yeah, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Pawpaw's Campers and Cars. You can find them at pawpawsrvs.com or call them at 1-800-728-CAMP, CAMP, or 1-800-728-2267, and we'll be right back.
Hey neighbors, we're not that far from where you are. Make that short drive to Pawpaw's Campers in Picayune and see our Wildwood, Catalina, Sportsman, and Zinger trailer lines and our Rockwood and Heritage Glen fifth wheel lines. From Houma to Hammond, Biloxi to Jackson, and Mobile and Pensacola, we're not that far from where you are. Come and see us.
You're gonna love the way we deal. Pawpaw's Camper City and Picayune. You're gonna love the way we deal.
That's a good RV, Pawpaw.
Okay, we're back here on the Tiger Rag Audibles podcast. This is Todd Horne, and we missed some of the introduction there. I am on the road to Oxford right now to catch the Tigers and the Rebels in a very pivotal and key SEC West game. Of course, LSU is 2-0 and Ole Miss is 0-1. And, these two teams are extremely evenly matched, at least on paper, heading into the game. LSU is a 2.5-point favorite. Most computer predictions and models I've seen actually favor Ole Miss winning the game. Because simply it's in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. I personally don't think that that's going to be much of a factor for this Tiger team. LSU under Brian Kelly has played exceptionally well on the road. They seem to handle situations and conditions and play well in enemy territory. I would expect them to do the same tomorrow at 5 p.m. on 5 p.m. Central on ESPN. There are some keys to the game, though. Number one, there's and this is my first one. I put it at the top because I think it's the most important. Ole Miss has an first-team preseason All-American running back in Quinshon Judkins. He, however, has not performed up to speed or up to the level where they thought he was going to perform this year, and consequently, Ole Miss's running attack has not been what it was expected to be so far. We're hoping it doesn't break out against LSU this week. That's my first key, is LSU is going to have to continue to control what has been a controllable Ole Miss running game this year, unexpectedly so. Judkins has 201 yards rushing, but he's only averaging about 3.5 yards per carry this season, and that's behind an experienced offensive line that quite honestly hasn't been performing well against Tulane. Tulane in New Orleans did lose to Ole Miss, but they pretty much controlled the line of scrimmage on both sides the entire game and probably would have won that game had Tulane not been without its starting quarterback the entire game. He was out with an injury. Against Alabama last week, again, they struggled. I think they only gained 56 yards total rushing on the offensive side. And they've relied very heavily on Jackson Dart, their quarterback, to pull them out of basically 3 games this year. He's only thrown 2 interceptions. Dart has all season. He's probably him and Lane Kiffin have probably connected quite a bit this week in terms of game planning against LSU's secondary, which has given up 9 touchdown passes this season. So my first key is kind of like a combination. LSU has to continue to stop the run, and they're going to have to do a much better job in the defensive secondary covering Ole Miss's receivers and containing Jackson Dart, who, like KJ Jefferson, he's not the size of KJ Jefferson. I wouldn't quantify him as a runner, the scale or ability of KJ Jefferson, but Dart can run. He is a dual threat quarterback, and if you want to label him as such, not to the level of KJ Jefferson, but he can also throw the ball really well. The problem is even though they're going to look to take advantage of LSU's secondary, which has been taken advantage of most of this season, as we all know, he doesn't have that great of a stable of wide receivers. But they are looking for Trey Harris, who's a transfer from Louisiana Tech, a Louisiana native. They expected big things from him this year. He's been injured. He'll be coming back. So LSU's defensive secondary is going to have to keep their eyes on Trey Harris. They're going to have to contain Jackson Dart, and they're going to have to begin to stop some passing. If LSU can keep Ole Miss under 100 yards again, which would be the 3rd time this year if they're able to accomplish that Ole Miss has been held under 100 yards, and they're able to play better assignment coverage in the defensive secondary and basically control the passing game so they don't get bludgeoned like they have a tendency to do, then LSU stands a chance defensively. I expect key number 2, if you will, Jaden Daniels to continue to have the type of season that Jaden Daniels is having, and it's a prolific season so far. He's going to need to have one. Ole Miss's defensive secondary or defensive coordinator, Pete Golding, is a former Alabama coordinator. He's in his first year. at Ole Miss, and he's running a lot of the same things that LSU saw from Alabama last year when Golding was there. So they're familiar with his schemes and what he does. Ole Miss is a very talented defense, but they have not been exceptionally strong across the defensive front, which is supposedly their strong point for most of the year. So another key for LSU is not just going to be Jaden Daniels continuing his path so far this year that he's had, but it's also going to be the running game. LSU has shown semblances, especially with Logan Diggs leading the way at running back, and that experienced and strong offensive line that the Tigers have of establishing the run. I expect LSU to be physical. I look for LSU to try and approach the 200-yard mark in rushing this game, and I think if they can do that, they can slow down the game a little bit. Ole Miss is going to be wanting to go fast offensively. LSU is not one to shy away from a fast game or a fast-paced game, but I think it may bode well for the Tigers in this game to establish a strong physical running game, balance that with the passing. And, of course, you have Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas that are terrorizing defenses so far this year. I expect that Ole Miss is going to be focused on trying to contain both of those guys. Look for Mason Taylor, LSU sophomore tight end, to have a big game. So strong running attack from LSU is expected. I expect them to try to establish that. I look for Logan Diggs to have a good game. I look for Mason Taylor to have a good game. I look for Jaden Daniels to have a good game. And you hope that the LSU defense is going to be able to control or continue to control the rushing game for Ole Miss, as well as put up some type of defense against the passing game. All in all, Jake, I'm looking at an LSU win, but I think it's going to be very, very close to what we looked at last week. I do think LSU is going to establish the running game against the Rebels and maybe chew up some clock, probably win time of possession pretty radically. And so instead of it being, say, a 34-31 game a la last week, I think LSU is actually going to win by about 31-23.
Okay. All right. You're on the record.
I'm on the record. 31-23 is what I'm saying, and that's adjusted from earlier in the week. I'm going back and forth. Now, don't get me wrong. LSU could score more points than that, but let's hope they don't have to, because I think that's the type of game and the pace of game they would like to play. And now I guess we're going to sort of go into our conversation with Wilson Alexander of The Advocate. Wilson is the lead beat reporter, and Jeff Palermo and myself spent some time with him earlier this week, and some interesting insights as always. So let's go ahead and go to that interview with Wilson Alexander, and we'll be back after that.
The LSU Tigers coming off a 34-31 win over Arkansas. The Tigers 2-0 in the SEC West, 3-1 overall. Wilson Alexander provides excellent analysis on the LSU Tigers. Of course, covers LSU for The Advocate and NOLA.com. Wilson, welcome back to the program. Glad to have you on. Glad our phones are working this time around. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, Jeff. Todd, how are you guys?
We're doing good. We're doing good. Is there any hope for this LSU defense?
He's right, too. He does it every time, Wilson.
There is hope. There is hope. Not all is lost yet. What we've seen with this defense is that when it is able to get a pass rush and get home to the quarterback, then this can be a really effective group. It's kind of reliant upon that because of the apparent deficiencies that are in the secondary, and it's going to maybe over the course of the year the secondary can get better, at least be able to, in those moments when KJ's rolling out to his right, remember its assignment, like in the Zy Alexander's case, to stick with the tight end and on that route. And if it's able to clean those kinds of things up, then this can be a group that at least maybe we know that the offense is really good, and if the defense can at least just get a little bit better, then you start to feel much better about LSU over the course of the season, maybe not having to be in a close game every week in and week out. And so if they get more assignment correct, better eye discipline, and sort of things like that, then they can improve Is it going to be one of the elite groups in the country? Probably not, but it can at least get better. Not all hope is lost. You do see when you look at this group that they are able to get a pass rush. Now it's just about sort of finishing on a lot of those plays too. And so they're maybe not as far off as it feels like. I think there are things that are attainable that can happen here in fairly short order to make this defense better, but it's got to go out and do it.
So, Wilson, you brought up good points, and obviously Kelly was talking about it too, and I'm sure you talked to him in greater detail. But the Zy Alexander releasing the tight end on the 59-yard touchdown pass, that's 7 points, or turned into 7 points, and then the where they flooded the zone. Those are eye discipline, like you said, and executing the detail and just following through on what you're supposed to do responsibility-wise. And they are all correctable, and they are a young defense. But I think somebody needs to teach them how to tackle, too.
Absolutely. It's wild a little bit because LSU does a tackling circuit at the beginning of every practice. Like we've seen it every time the media's out there. And so it's not just like something they're only doing when we're out there. I mean, that is a basic part of their practice structure is at the beginning they do a tackling circuit. But for whatever reason, they've not been a great tackling team. It got a lot better against Mississippi State. We, of course, heard going into that game how they did more full tackling scrimmage kind of work during practice that week, that the defense was asking for it. Kelly is really sort of strategic about, or tries to be, in terms of how much they're tackling during practice because he doesn't want guys to be getting hurt. And sort of it's not that old school mentality of just full tackle every practice. That can have some drawbacks, and maybe that's what we're seeing a little bit here is that maybe this is a group that needs to be tackling more during the week. But, of course, you then on the flip side maybe expose your offensive players. And so, anyway, it's just that they do need to get better at tackling. I think we've seen it, especially when they are trying to tackle in space one-on-one. They haven't been great in that regard. The safeties and some of the DBs in that particular have missed some tackles. KJ Jefferson, for instance, on his 25-yard run in the first half that set up Arkansas's first field goal. It was 3rd and 10, and LSU had pressure. Mekhi Wingo bull rushed the right tackle into KJ Jefferson, but he was able to step up, and Andre Sam had him in the hole, and KJ juked and was able to pick up a big gain. And so that's another area where it's like if they can tackle better, then they are in position oftentimes to make plays. But now you do got to actually go finish the tackle.
What Jeff asked me this for my opinion, and I'm still not close to giving up on Mason Smith, but Mason Smith has not had so far the season that I think any of us expected he would have, especially against the competition, meaning Mississippi State and Arkansas. And are you concerned as a beat writer that covers this team that he's not progressing as quickly as maybe everyone thought he would, coaches specifically?
Yeah, to an extent. There was obviously a lot of hype about Mason Smith going into the year, and it wasn't just, us blowing sort of hot air. I mean, LSU's coaches were really excited about what he could be this season. Brian Kelly, on the record publicly was talking about what Mason could do for this defense. And yet, there were maybe some hints, like Matt House said that there was still a good bit of rust there and that his pad level was too high. And that was before Mason had the ankle sprain and then re-aggravated it. And so, already coming off the ACL, he then wouldn't have even been 100% for the first game, even if he hadn't been suspended by the NCAA. And so, there's probably needs to be a little bit of a resetting of expectations in terms of that it's going to take him a little bit of time to get back to what we know he can be, what we saw at times early on as a freshman. And so it hasn't been there yet. Luckily, you do have like Jordan Jefferson, who has looked really good in stints. Are they going to ever I don't think they're going to give up on Mason, but it does become an interesting discussion of, are you going to start Jordan or at least work him into the rotation much more? Mason has to have playing time in order to knock off some of this rust and kind of get himself back into form. So you can't just leave him on the bench. And, if he can get back to that, then he's a very talented player. It just might be a situation where he does need a little bit more time to get back to what he can be.
Talking with Wilson Alexander, who covers the LSU Tigers for The Advocate. What about the LSU run game? Do you expect them to go to Logan Diggs, Caleb Jackson a little bit earlier in this game instead of waiting until the second half to really try to establish a ground game?
That's going to be interesting. I mean, I obviously don't know for sure. It was kind of strange during Arkansas. You see Jaden struggling early, and they were having some success on the ground. Arkansas was a defense that had only given up 55 yards rushing per game coming into that, but they hadn't played a team like LSU. And, of course, Josh Williams had the 41-yard run. But even, not just that sort of big chunk play, like Logan Diggs had 2 carries for 10 yards. Like there were seams there and creases there that LSU wasn't yet trying to exploit until the second half. So I'll be really curious to see if they do, because they are, offenses are obviously best when they're balanced, and LSU wants to be that way. It worked out in this game long term, bringing in Logan Diggs and really amping him up in the second half ended up being effective. But this is an offense that has talked about wanting to be able to run the football and do it so outside of just Jaden Daniels sort of taking off with his legs. And so we'll just kind of have to wait and see if they end up going that route against Ole Miss, because they've had success when they have been running the football ever since Logan Diggs came back into the lineup.
LSU's passing game, Wilson, has been clicking with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. What do you think of this dynamic duo that they have here? And, they're obviously tough to stop, Malik's especially. But this probably might mean, and I know Mason Taylor is still coming back from an ankle sprain, but this might mean it'll be interesting to see how they get incorporated some other guys as well. Whether it's Aaron Anderson with Chris Hilton, but right now Malik and Brian are doing so well. It's kind of hard to get some other guys involved in that passing game.
Malik's the engine, of course, for all of this, and it's amazing how much defenses are going to, as even more than they already are, pay attention to him. And LSU is able, though, to move him around the defense because he's learned all of the receiver positions, move him around the offense because he's learned all the receiver positions, and that makes it hard to cover him and bracket coverage him and maybe even double him. And even when defenses do that, it opens up things for everybody else. So Brian Thomas is going to be the main recipient of that. We saw it against Arkansas and continue to be moving forward. If Malik is in those double team situations and drawing the attention of defenses, then Brian and these other receivers are going to have one-on-ones. And Jaden Daniels, as we've seen so far this season, has been much better about giving his receivers a chance to go catch the ball in a one-on-one situation. There's been some moments when they haven't quite connected here in the early part of the year, but on the whole, they have. And it's been extremely effective when they do so. Brian now, the big question kind of in preseason camp when it came to the receivers was there's obviously talent here, but who's really going to be the number 2? Because Brian didn't have like a really standout preseason camp. He is now, though, gone for over 400 yards, which is already a career high in a season for him 4 games into the year. And he's really emerged as a quality number 2 option, which is what you wanted to see from him in his junior season. And it gives you a fantastic 1-2 punch. With Mason Taylor is going to probably, it's going to continue to get incorporated into this offense. We know that they trust him. We know that he can catch the ball and be a solid tight end there. And that was as he gets healthy, which is really the big thing with him, as Brian Kelly said, then he'll be, probably your number 3. And then, you start to work in other guys in certain spots. Let's see, maybe they do a little bit more Chris Hilton, maybe some more gadget kind of stuff with Aaron Anderson. That can all be certainly complementary to what they do in the passing game. But it starts with Malik and Brian now as well.
Wilson, what has your assessment been of the offensive line in terms of pass protection throughout the first 4 games of this season?
My first thought on that is that it hasn't been too bad. I mean, we saw in the Florida State game that they had trouble blocking for the run on those sort of inside handoffs, but they in pass pro were doing an okay job. And they were giving Jaden Daniels, he got hit a good bit against Mississippi State. I can't remember Arkansas only had 2 sacks the other night, I believe, and they were both in the first half.
Right.
And so Arkansas was bringing a lot of pressure, and it seemed like early on maybe that was overwhelming things offensively. Jaden Daniels' footwork was starting to get really quick and out of rhythm, but once he started to settle down, at the same time the offensive line was picking up those blitzes and picking up what Arkansas was doing. And that is obviously was allowing what happened in the passing game to occur because Jaden had time to throw the ball. And so I think that it's been pretty solid in pass pro. The run blocking has come along here too over the last few weeks. It certainly helps that they've kind of got their full stable of running backs and they're finding answers there with Logan Diggs in particular. I think the pass pro, all in all, has not been something that has hindered this team to this point.
So Zalance Hurd seemed to get less playing time against Ole Miss. Do you think against Arkansas? Do you think we'll see more of him against Ole Miss, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'd be interested to ask Brian Kelly about that at some point this week, because I know it's the same thing. They went away from that rotation, which had been so prevalent against scrambling, less of it against Arkansas, and then less of it against Mississippi State, than he didn't play against Arkansas on the offensive side. And so I think we would maybe need to hear from them publicly about like kind of what the plan might be there, because as we said kind of all along, it wasn't a necessity to get him into the lineup like it was last year with Emory Jones and Will Campbell. Like, you had no other choice. They can bring him along. Brian Kelly used a few different words to describe it. He's used gradually. He's used intentionally. All to sort of say, like, he doesn't need to get thrust in here before he's ready. He's still going to be a very, very talented football player here, but it's not necessarily a situation where, because Miles Frazier seems to have been playing a little bit better over the last few weeks than he did in the opener against Florida State. It's not necessarily a thing where you have to throw Solance in there at this point if you don't feel comfortable with him starting in an SEC game.
What happens when Omar Spates is healthy? What do we see at linebacker, Wilson?
We see this for sure. Greg Penn is going to be out there.
Yeah.
Whit Weeks has been the one who's like really, really flashing, but Greg is the one who Brian Kelly called the stabilizer on defense. The guy, he's the one who Savion Jones said the other day is like, he can hear Greg making all the calls. And even Whit, we talked to him tonight. And by the way, LSU fans listening, y'all are going to love Whit Weeks. His enthusiasm for this place and for football in general is infectious. But he was saying, like, there's still a lot of moments where he's like, wait, what am I doing? And he's turning to Greg Penn to say, what am I doing? And Greg's helping him get lined up so that he can then go make plays and use his athleticism and be what we've seen so far. So Greg is probably going to be the one who is always maybe out there. But as Omar comes back, then there'll probably be a little bit of a rotation between him and Whit. As good as Whit has played, Omar is someone who they like, and he's going to have a chance to see what he can probably do in some case, but it is going to be fascinating. Assuming that he is back this week against Ole Miss at this point, we'll get more updates tomorrow probably, and then certainly on Thursday. It'll be fascinating to see what LSU does in terms of a rotation with now 3 guys, which is a good problem to have, and a better situation at linebacker than they had even just a few weeks ago.
So really quick, Wilson, you don't think there's any credence to the fact that Lane Kiffin's begging Brian Kelly to put Harold Perkins back inside? It's not going to happen, huh?
I think they're going to ignore Lane on this one.
Hey, Wilson, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Look forward to hearing what you write about when it comes to what Whit Weeks said, a growing star on that LSU defense. No doubt about it. Thanks a lot, man. We appreciate it.
Thanks, y'all. Have a great night.
People come from everywhere to Pawpaw's Campers and Cars.
Only Pawpaw's Campers and Shit is Pawpaw's Campers and Cars are people. And we're gonna let it go for I forgot. Take the whole family over to Picayune. We got something for you. All right. What else we gonna say? PawpawsNicePrice.com. That's probably all we need to say.
All right, thanks, Wilson, and thank you, Jeff, for that interview. Of course, that interview was earlier this week, but we thought it had enough. I thought it had enough bite to it and a lot of insight from Wilson. So I thought it would be a very interesting listen today as we head into as we're on the eve of the Ole Miss LSU game. I did want to provide you with an update. Of course, Omar Spates is 100%. And will be, I don't know if he'll start at linebacker, but he will be playing. Kelly did say that he will not play the entire game, so expect freshman Whit Weeks to continue his hot start to his career and season here at LSU. Whit Weeks, in place of Omar Spates during his injury, started first against Mississippi State, led the team in tackles with 8. Came back last week against Arkansas and was second on the team with 9 tackles. So Whit Weeks is having a tremendous start to his career and season here at LSU, and he will probably be splitting time in the rotations with Omar Spates this weekend. So that's it. Again, I'm predicting LSU 31, Ole Miss 23. And I'd like to once again thank Jake McMains for connecting with me while I'm on the road. Jake, of course, is our producer here for the Tiger Rag Audibles podcast. And I'd also like to thank Pawpaw's campers and cars. That's at pawpawsrvs.com. That's a good RV, Pawpaw. And Jake, I don't have the number with me, so I'm looking at you to.
Yeah, we're looking at
provide
pawpawsrvs.com, 1-800-728-CAMP. That's camp, 1-800-728-2267.
All right, go Tigers.